So it's been a few days now since the union came out and sort of give their options about how they planned to move the game forward in Wales at the club level. They had four options, but as they admitted themselves, their favourite was to cut from four regions down to two. They didn't really give any information on how they would do that, which is kind of frustrating, but that was what the favourite thing was. But apparently the consultation is open to suggestions from clubs and just other people. And Dave Redding, Abby Turney, Collier Keyword, they all said, we want people to get involved, give us suggestions and stuff like that. And when I made my two videos last week, they were admittedly quite emotional. I was reacting on as being maybe just a fan and not impartial. And a few people quite rightly pointed out in the comments that I didn't really come up with any solution or what I would do, which is a fair comment. So I thought I would actually say what I would do and how hopefully I could see a plan working that didn't consist of cutting our regions in half. So it is, you cannot deny that it's not working. The finances are apparently not there. I still think that the percentage of the budget that they allocate from their profit is not substantial, and it's less than other teams like Ireland and stuff like that. But that's a discussion for another video. They said that their plan was to fund these two teams at 7.8 million, which is a substantial jump from where we are now. But it's not like a break in the bank. We'd be sort of on par with the Scottish teams, and Benetton, I think, are around that mark. So we're not really pushing into the top echelon. So you got to think we're losing half of the teams and not really getting the stratospheric jump that we kind of possibly need. But that's by the by. So what I would do is I would go personally to a 2+1. So we would have to lose a team, unfortunately. I'll move on to that later, how we should try and approach that. But I would even be willing to accept a 1+2, one really well funded. But I think the best option would be two really well funded and then one underneath, which could be the development club. And I know some people say, well, who's going to support a development club? I've spoke to a few fans who are fans of the West Wales clubs, and both of them, when I asked them this question, have said they would rather be the development club than lose their club altogether. So, that admittedly is only a couple of people I've spoke to, but they all said the same thing. So I'll take them on their word for that. My idea would be two main teams, one development team. Now, I did a video a couple of weeks ago on the depth chart that Steve Tandy was basically looking at when he came in, and there was roughly 90 odd players that he would be probably tracking for Wales. And when I went back and looked at my notes, there's about 70 to 75 players that Steve Tandy will probably be having a look at for Wales and keeping monitoring. So if you think you split those, you put 30 in one of the top regions and 30 in the other top regions, that's 60, and then you got 15 then roughly to drop down to the development region. So could be some of the younger players that are just needing opportunities, can be some of the squad players that they're hoping could push, or were experienced players, played their international rugby and maybe coming down now, they can be in there. Then you've got somewhere for the academy players to go and play when they need to bridge a gap. You could give them, like 2-year contracts in another team, and then they're getting exposure. Because what the problem for me is, and I'm taking the whole tribalism out of it, the thing that really worries me is having two squads of 50 of the best players who are Welsh in Wales, and then every weekend you're having over 50 players that are not going to be getting any rugby. Now, you can drop them down to SRC level, and I know that's something they spoke about. That level is going to have to get better, and I would imagine it should, because I thought this year was pretty good, and they want to invest more. They might have worked out some kinks that didn't work last year. They made tweaks, and I think it's going to improve again. So more funding going into that would make sense. But I think not having enough places for players to come in and make an impact is really going to suffer the national team the long term. We might get to a point where we have a decent national team and we do okay We beat the lesser teams, but I don't see us ever competing for the top tier of, winning Six Nations and going deep in World Cups. And if you're not planning on doing that in the future, then what are you planning for? Because ultimately, we are a tier one rugby nation, and of course, we don't have the finances and the population, but we should still be striving for that because that's what you play the sport for. You want to win stuff. So that's one of my biggest issues. And I'll just use an example of like a Tombo in this year. He came in for the Cheetahs game, I believe it was, for Cardiff in the European Cup, because there was issues with the depth on the wing. And then he had a couple of games in the league, I believe, as well. And you could see that he could maybe develop it in that level. And then when he went to the under-20s, you could see that he was a little bit of a tier above. So if you only have two regions, there's no way Tom Bowen is playing for Cardiff or for an East Division, or it doesn't, regardless of who they are. There's no way he's going to be playing for either of those regions, because if you've got 50 players, then a coach is naturally going to pick and have to pick the best players that he has at his disposal. That means that Tom Bowen might not get top URC rugby for the next 2 or 3 years. You just don't know how long it might take for him to come through the system and for a coach to recognise and give him an opportunity. So that is my biggest worry. Also, I think, I know the URC have apparently said that they are not willing to accept 3 teams. I think this could also potentially work over into the English Championship, which is where I think if this plan is going to work, we need to move it over there, because you could even have the 2 top teams going into the Premiership and then the other team going into the English Championship. Again, I know it's not ideal, but we're not in an ideal position. And I still think the Welsh English rivalry will get enough people to go to that, watch games in that. Interesting, this week I was listening to the Wales Online podcast, and they were saying about the appetite to potentially join the English Premiership is there. And I know they're not always the most reliable of sources, but I think everything they've said on the regions getting cut down has been spot on so far, and they called it a long time ago. And I think maybe they could potentially be right on this from what their sources say. But apparently that the two whatever regions would be, to the regions joining the English Premiership, they estimate that it's between 2 and 3 million improved every year due to better gate receipts, better possible sponsorship opportunities and stuff like that. So I mean, that's a figure someone's come up with, but that's what they were saying on there. So if we want this to work, I still think we need to leave the URC. As an amazing competition it is, the standard of rugby is excellent in the URC, but it's just the travel, and there's just no rivalries. And if you're going to now go to and make 2 teams out of thin air, let's just call them East and West to make it easier, then you need to have some reason to bring people down. Because if you're saying West Wales region is playing Edinburgh on a Friday night, people just aren't going to be interested. I'm sorry, and it's no disrespect to Edinburgh, it's just the first club that comes to my head. If you say West Wales region is playing Bath or Gloucester, I think you will drag people in, because that is an English-Welsh rivalry, and for whatever it is, those rivalries are what we want to see, and I think that's what the English clubs want to see as well. So again, it's a lot of speculation there, I understand that, but I just think that is a crucial part of this plan, that we need to try and move in that way. And 3 teams to me still fits into that, because you could drop one down, and there is talk of promotion and relegation, and they're trying to strengthen the championship because they want to make promotion and relegation a thing. So if they wanted to strengthen the championship, what is better than bringing in a Welsh region that can be able to potentially get promoted and go into the top league? So that's what I think. I know the money is getting spent elsewhere, but as I said, 7.8 million is not that much. And just touching on the campus thing that they're talking about, when I initially heard the idea, I thought, I quite like that. They're all there, they're on really good facilities. But the more thought about it, and we've heard a lot of ex-pros talk about it, Jonathan Davis springs to mind saying, I would hate that. I wanted the rivalry when they were having derby games. I think it dilutes that a lot. And when you're going to have only two derbies a year between only two teams, you want that to be like as big an intensity moment as you can, and plenty of niggle. And if they're having dinner in the canteen the day before the game, it just doesn't strike me that is going to be really something that comes naturally, that the rivalry and stuff like that. I could be wrong. Hopefully I am. And also I think if you Dave Redden's talking about collaboration a lot. I think this campus thing's going to go ahead because it seems like it's his baby, and I think he's going to move forward with that regardless. But I think what might be better is on a monthly or even like a fortnightly basis, the regional club coaches, whatever they end up being, go to the Vale and they have like a clinic or a day there or whatever where they talk, they say like what the issues are, things that could give, can help bounce off ideas and improve the standards around the thing. Steve Tandy will be there and say, this is what we feel like we need for Wales to get better. Work with the coaches. The coaches can take that back to the players. I don't think the players need to be mingling with each other outside of Wales camp. But you may disagree with that on me. So I did want to go into how you would decide, because you'd have to decide. Someone has to go, unfortunately, because funds do have to be made. So what I've come up with just some criteria what I think they really need to look at, because I'm not going to sit here and say I think this club is going to go, and people might say worse or whatever, but I've got my own dog in the fight. I support one of the regions. I don't know the financial situation. I don't know how many players they've developed, so I've got some stipulations, and this is what I think it needs to, all the emotion come out of it, and it needs to just go down to these basic things. Okay, so first of all, you need to assess the financial position, what their assets and liabilities are, all the stuff that makes finance pros hard, and how much percentage benefactors are putting in to keep the rugby operations afloat. Because something that's been glossed over, I think, on this whole thing, yes, the union's basically going to be centrally contracting the players, but there is still going to be reliance, even though it's less than it is at the moment, there is still reliance on benefactors. So if the union's taking all this control, then still relying on other people to put money into the game to make the commercial side work doesn't make sense to me, if you get what I mean. So yeah, that was a problem I did have. And then also you need to assess the fan bases, not just attendances, although that is important. I think you need to go as deep as social media reach. I know people will roll their eyes, but that's the day and age we live in. You need to be getting fans engaged online, because that's where the young fans are. Even go as deep as merchandise. Like, how well is their merchandise selling? Are people buying Ospreys tops? Are they buying Dragons tops? Do you know what I mean? Like, because that's fans. That's what fans do. That's a measure of how well you support, I think, anyway. Like, think of how many people walk around with Liverpool tops on. Like, that is a measure of their success. And then success over the last 5 to 10 years. Of course, history is important, but I think history, it needs to be forgotten after a certain amount of time in this decision, because of how sort of trying to take the emotion out of it. And when you go back to the history of clubs, all the clubs have got amazing rich histories, so I would leave the history out of it, but just look at it over success for the last 5 to 10 years, and that would be win percentage, how much silverware they've got, and most importantly, how many players are they producing for Wales. And that is surely quite an easy thing to go if with all the database that the WRU have of how many Welsh international caps has the Dragons produced for Wales, how many have Cardiff produced, and so on. I think that's a good measure of success for the regions. And then also an important thing is the area they cover, and I don't just mean geographically. How many grassroots clubs are in that area? because they're going to need to be served by someone. How would you divide the area up for the team that is going to be got rid of? How many schools are in that area, because you're going to have to get into schools, like is currently on the clubs, I believe, to get into schools. I could be wrong with that. Specifically schools with like rugby programs. So there's there's probably other stuff that I've missed, so you probably point me out on that as well. But I think you need to really take the emotion out of that for that side, and I think you really need to go really deep on the detail to see what is the least viable region, if that's the way you're going to explain it. So I know I've gone over a lot of stuff there on this video. I've probably gone on this video is probably longer than I was expecting to make it, but I've tried to come at this video with no emotions, because we're emotional as Welsh rugby fans. There has been an outpour of disappointment and frustration I've read mainly online. Some people have said they agree that it goes down to 2, and that's fair. Everyone entitled to their opinion. But I just think personally, this is what I think. I think 3 is the best option, however way you want to work that, but I think 2 plus the 1 is better. So young players are going to get developed. You have 2 top teams with a better budget, may be able to entice players back to Wales from England. The likes of Dav Jenkins may come back, Tommy Raffel, you never know. And then the young players that are coming back, say for example this year, you're having Harry Beddle, the Wales under-20s captain, up in Leicester, in the Leicester Academy and stuff. And now he's decided he's going to come back to the Dragons and try and get into the Dragons team. To me, I don't think he does that if there's 2 teams, because he knows he can go back and he's challenging for a role in the Dragons this year. He knows if he trains well, he's going to have a good chance of getting games for the Dragons. And if you go down to 2, that doesn't happen. There's no way he comes back and plays. He's going to be stuck at the bottom of the academy like he is now, or like he was at Leicester. And I think that is the key point for me. Funds and everything is all sort of like important, I understand, but 2 teams only gives you 46 or whatever players getting exposure every game, and when there's 100 players in 2 squads, it's not enough, in my opinion. So I'll stop because I've gone on for too long, but let me know what you think, and I will catch you on the next one.